Hey there, Independent Scientologists. Discover a new perspective to your bridge by visiting ao-gp.org. Get in session with remote auditing using the Theta Meter. Are you curious about where you stand? Head on over to ao-gp.org now and take our free personality test. Join the growing group of independent Scientologists today.
Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Outside of the Church podcast. It is season 9, episode 13. And I'm here with Arthur Mudakis and Scientology Girl. How are you guys?
Good, just tired.
Morning.
Had a hectic workout, so.
Good morning, Arthur. It's been a few days since we've done a podcast. Busy. This podcast is going to be about why Scientology doesn't work for some people. And this was a request from a listener, and I'm going to read the specifics of what he was looking for on this. Let's see here. He says, can you do a podcast on why some get free with this tech and some don't? He says, I'm curious why that is. Ron talks about we're all OT, but you have to have the willingness to be OT. I guess if I can figure out why some don't win and some do, despite them wanting those abilities, would make us understand the tech better. I wish everyone could win with the tech of auditing and training. Why some don't have OT abilities and just feel better and more in present time is an interesting puzzle I'd like to solve. Maybe I'll answer that question for myself one day, but it'd be interesting if you had a chat about that. I suppose maybe some people do certain bridge steps and a test just to the end, to end the cycle and get on with the next step, thinking they'll reach some higher states, but they're lying to themselves and their auditors about a testing. Like cheating their way through levels instead of really getting the real and phenomena of the Scientology auditing / solo auditing and or training. I find it odd that I get OT when studying the tech like many others, but many others don't, studying for years. I wish everyone could wake up from the illusion and win. So that's what we're going to do the podcast about. It gives us a pretty good platform on that. So we're going to start out with the basics. I was half asleep this morning while Scientology Girl was working out on her treadmill, thinking about this, and it's sort of all mapped out in front of me. And I think the absolute first thing is why don't people get gains from things? Because there's a bunch of reasons. Well, the first primary reason is they don't understand what it is they're doing. I mean, it's just plain simple. They don't understand what it is they're doing. So they have, you can ask somebody, do you understand? And they can say yes. And maybe they really don't duplicate it. They don't understand it. And that comes back to misunderstood words, concept symbols, but it also comes down to the CDEI scale, which is know, understand, curious, desired, enforced, inhibited, no, NO, not KNOW, that's the opposite end, and refused. If somebody is doing Scientology for the wrong reason, for example, we get people, fix my wife, please, all the time. And we have a firm policy that if the person who is asking for their wife or husband to be fixed, they need to get auditing themselves. We don't just audit the person that is the finger is being pointed at 99% of the time. The person asking,
critical.
Right. The person that is asking for the other person to be audited is the one that you need to look at, and they need to get auditing as well. So it has to be both of them. But when somebody is pushed into doing something, and your Scientology Girl, your big direction is self-determinism, pan-determinism, all of that. If somebody isn't doing something on their own volition, they're not going to get anything from it. Mm-hmm. And I know people that have gone up the entire bridge or at least a clear for sure and stopped because their husband or wife wanted them to. Because they're not interested in own case and willing to talk to the auditor. I mean, it would be like going to college because your parents wanted you to.
Yeah.
Would you really be there and get something out of it? No. So these things happen, and they happen a lot. But and that falls back to again, the CDEI scale: curious, desired, enforced, inhibited, no, and refused. Are you being forced to do something?
Mm.
Well, then you're low on the CDEI scale. If you're curious about it, okay, then you're more than halfway. The half the battle is won, because self-determinism is curiosity. You want to know something. If your parents force you to play piano, is it going to be any fun? No. If it isn't fun, if you're not having fun with it, if you're not being able to be creative with it, what are you going to get from it? Are you going to do anything with it? These are basic things. So you get maybe 20, 25, 30% of what it is that you can. You guys are being awful quiet. I feel like I'm talking to myself.
I'm just waiting for you to finish.
Oh, okay. Scientology girl, Arthur, what do you guys think on this?
Okay, well, for me, and my experiences, and also, dealing with a lot of people, because I'm always trying to like understand people and what motivates them and all that stuff. No official thing. I just have a curiosity
What's your motivation
towards people.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and something that I've seen within myself and others is look, the reactive mind, obviously as a Scientologist, we're like, okay, the reactive mind, it's sort of like, but let me tell you, it is a beast. It is something that, I mean, you can be at your most conscious level,
Mm-hmm.
and it can take something that's, obviously restimulative to somebody, and all their consciousness just goes out the door. And this is why people, they make decisions and then they decide, no, they're not going to do it anymore. It's because of that reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
So I think first and foremost, that's the biggest thing, because if your reactive mind wasn't there, then you could take the KRC, knowledge, responsibility, and control,
Mm-hmm.
for things.
Mm-hmm.
And the responsibility part, I think that's probably the biggest reason why I think people fail with Scientology is because, I mean, in order to face your demons, to face these things that you don't want to face, whether it's past lives or present life trauma, or, mommy and daddy did this to me, or whatever the case may be, it is incredibly difficult to confront those things.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases. And all of us have that thing that we dare not look at, we dare not touch, but you have to. And I think that's where you sort of kick up. And then there's also obviously the knowledge part of it. Like, for example, Matterhorns, right? So to those listening, a Matterhorn is basically somebody whose certainty is so high that it's higher than all of the other things in the OCA. And what that basically means is that
The personality test.
yeah, you're very difficult to train.
Mm-hmm.
So because you have all these fixed ideas and these things that you've told yourself, they're true. Look, it's not necessarily a terrible thing, because if your certainty is high, that's great. That means that, you're you at least have your beliefs, and those beliefs can guide you into making the correct decision. However, if the rest of your traits are down and your certainty is up, that means that if you have a shitty outlook on life, it is going to be incredibly difficult to change that for you, because you think you know all the answers. So that's another one, is the
know best.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Arthur was nodding his head earlier.
And then one more thing with the control aspect, because we're going through knowledge, responsibility, and control. But
Mm-hmm.
the control aspect is, I guess, this is the willingness. If you don't see your issues as that bad, you see other things as more important, like making money or going out, and your second dynamic and all of these things, what are you going to do? You're going to just be like, it's not that important. And that's also another thing that has to do with confront as well. Which is one of the first things you learn with communication is you've got to be willing to confront. So those are some of the things that I think is very important when considering whether or not any subject can actually work for you.
Arthur, you were nodding in the reactive mind area forward.
That was all really well said. Really well
Thank
said.
you.
And it kind of brings me back to, the basic study course, like all the phenomena that's presented in the basic study course. You guys have represented all the way towards this subject. But especially around the reactive mind aspect, doing the Purif has really opened my eyes to the power of the reactive mind as well. And it is a monster. And I think for me, like I've got a new outlook on the reactive mind now, because it was so overwhelming, but it's obviously overwhelming. Whereas without doing the Purif, it's not as obvious or as easy to catch, interestingly enough. So having that opportunity, in such a sensitive and vulnerable position with the vitamins and the niacin, it really makes the reactive mind really obvious. There was a time where I was ready to pull out, and John's like, oh, that's just a reactive mind. And then as soon as he said that, it's like, oh, it is too. Like I was able to see it, but really easily. Whereas without that experience, it's really hard to see that reactive aspect. And working with so many people, from my experiences as well, it's amazing at how many people do want to strive for better and do want to move ahead. But then, as you were saying, Lisa, that little reactive mind comes in with the most incredible justifications.
Yeah.
So I've had so many people book a session in. They're so desperate today. Tomorrow, all of a sudden, the battery's gone flat. They've got a flat tire. One of their kids all of a sudden has become sick. They've injured themselves. They might not even turn up, and I just never hear from them again. Like those kind of things are real things, and they're real reactive responses. So I think that kind of says to me that sometimes endeavoring to better yourself can also seem detrimental to you as well. And I guess what I mean by that is there's a fear around change, and there's a fear around becoming something better because you can't quite understand what that looks like. And if you don't know what that looks like, that can be really, really scary.
Right.
But the simple truth of it is you just become you. You don't actually change. You just become a solid version of who you are with more control of your being. But if you don't know what that looks like, feels like, tastes like, smells like, that could be really, really scary. And so it kind of makes sense how the reactive mind works in that way to prevent you from progressing as well. It's really interesting.
Well,
Yep.
I was also thinking while you were talking, and you're absolutely right with all of that, but I think sometimes, no, all the time, really. I mean, obviously the reactive mind, or rather, okay, no, the the part of us that wants us to survive also wants us to be right. And I think anything that challenges that inadvertently, we could see or perceive with the reactive mind as making us wrong. So yeah, that's where things get complicated. I mean, let's look at something basic, like when you're reading and then a word comes up and you don't understand it. Eventually you blow and you're like, well, I don't want to, do this anymore. This is stupid. You become critical of the subject, all of that stuff. But really, it's just you resisting being made wrong. I think.
Are you implying I don't know something?
Right, exactly.
You see that all the time, especially with new people. It as an example, briefly.
And I just want to quickly add that it's not a conscious decision where you don't think to yourself when you've missed a word, oh, you know what, this is going to make me wrong, therefore I need to put it down. And all of the reactive mind is so consciously unconscious that, you know, you won't, you can't know.
Yeah. It's when somebody does Scientology, independent Scientology in the beginning, and they do the basic study course, or they get as far as doing the student hat. I mean, the big picture is getting the person to recognize and be okay with, I don't know every definition of every word, and you have to get them to drop that defensiveness of that I know everything, service facsimile, I'm right, you're wrong type of a thing. And it takes dozens and dozens of times on checkouts until they finally get the picture that, one, you're not trying to make them wrong. And this is one of the things that you run into with people is they never drop that social behavior of when somebody says they don't know something, you've been bested. That's not what we're trying to do in Dianetics and Scientology. We're trying to get you to look at you know you don't know something, and we get you to rise above I don't know. That is, and that's, I think that's what you're trying to describe, is transcending I don't know that I don't know to I know I don't know. And you're not trying to make me look stupid, foolish, like an idiot, whatever. And you run into that so much until they finally go, oh, okay, you're doing this for my betterment. And if people aren't trained, I mean, there are lots of clears and lots of OTs who got audited and audited and audited, and they never did student hat.
I mean, do you remember when I used to do clay demos early on?
Oh,
I used to get so pissed off because as an artist, I will spend time creating this fucking masterpiece only for you to say flunk. And it's just,
I don't see it.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also that point of seeing the benefit that will give you the encouragement to move forward a lot stronger with it as well. And I think sometimes that first real win is probably the catalyst for how you'll move forward from there as well.
Sure.
Because you can fake it. Like you said earlier, you know, you could say, yes, I got a win, and fake your way through. But then getting an actual win is very different. You know, sometimes some people would just say, yeah, that worked great. But did it really? For the sake of saying it. Yeah, that's right.
Because they're trying to save face, or they're embarrassed about it. I mean, you know, when somebody says, okay, so do you know Steve? Oh, yeah. I know Steve. And they don't know who the hell Steve is. I mean, if you sat down with a little clicker in your hand to yourself and said, how many times do I say I know or I understand something in one day? Yeah. You'd be surprised how much that automaticity kicks in. And then you go, 17 times? Am I doing this with Scientology? God, I am. And people go all the way up the bridge. They get this auditing. And this is a very important point, is somehow they're a bit removed. And this is only one way, but somehow they're a bit removed from it, as they can see and they can apply it to other people, but somehow they are avoidant, or they never quite connected that the information that Hubbard has written and that they've read, or that they've gotten auditing on, applies to them. I see this all the time. Yeah. And in both in the church and outside of the church. Yeah.
Here's a question then. Like, do you have to be a certain kind of person to be able to make it through the bridge? Or can anybody do it? You know, because some personalities will fly through. Some personalities will struggle, eventually get there. Some personalities will rock up and nothing will happen.
Well,
like,
there are a lot of reasons.
Is there a prerequisite? Yeah.
There's
is there
a few,
a prerequisite
yeah,
or a certain personality type that can make it through, or is it open to everybody if they want it?
Well, I think it is open to everybody if they want it, but there are things that get in the way, and I can see that you're itching to say something. And Arthur, feel free to chime in. I mean, yeah, there is a communication cycle and everything, but it's a podcast, and feel free to interject, either one of you, with me or vice versa, on all of this, because that's what this is about, is we're having a conversation together, and it's okay to do so. So feel free, guys. Go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say that, yes, there's definitely, it's a but. So you said anybody can. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say anybody can if.
Well, yeah. And that was pretty much what I was saying.
Anybody can progress if they are willing to not always be right, if they are willing to have their beliefs challenged, if they are curious about understanding, not at refused or enforced. Mm-hmm. If they really want change, if they can take the responsibility.
Mm-hmm. They're not phoning it in.
Yeah. If they don't have present time problems that is greater than their need for Scientology at the present moment. Mm-hmm. If they are, if they can stick it out, like if they're PTS, it's not going to happen.
Right.
If they're an SP, well, not going to get very far with that either.
Right. Yeah. And these are all real things. Now, mm-hmm. Arthur, your original question was, can anybody do it? Yeah. And like Scientology girl just said, if, and there are lots of ifs. One of those things is if a person is a potential trouble source, they may have what is called a hidden standard. Did my headache go away? No, then Scientology doesn't work.
Or
that's the hidden standard.
Or my headache went away, but maybe it was just because I drank some water after my session.
Right.
Yep.
And he says very early on.
Or did I even have a headache? Maybe I was just imagining that.
Well, and then we get into a person that's a significance case, and why is the sky blue? Now, I know it's blue, but why do they say it's blue? And I've trained with people like that, and I just want to
out like that.
There you go. I'm just teasing. I mean, that's the type of thing that you run into. But when a person is a potential trouble source, LRH talks about this in Suppressives and Hidden Standards. He says if you find a suppressive on a case, you'll also find a chronic problem. And this is from November of 1965. A problem is a postulate, counterpostulate. When a person is faced with suppression, he is facing a counterpostulate. The hidden standard is a problem a person thinks must be resolved before auditing can be seen to have worked. They have a headache, their headache goes away, then they think Scientology works. It's a standard by which to judge Scientology or auditing or the auditor. The hidden standard is always an old problem of long duration. It is a postulate counterpostulate situation. The source of the counterpostulate was suppressive to the PC. Therefore, you can always find a suppressive by finding a PC's hidden standard and following it back to when it began. You'll find there's a suppressive there to the PC at that time. The datum is a case that betters, then worsens, roller coasters, is always connected to a suppressive person. The roller coaster is caused by the hidden standard going into action. My eyesight didn't get better. Locate a present time suppressive on the case and trace that suppressive back to others earlier, and you suddenly see the PC brighten up and apparently for no reason state his eyesight suddenly improved. A case that betters and worsens is always connected to a suppressive person and will not get steady gain until the suppressive is found on the case or the basic suppressive person is earlier. I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to mention that as far as the church goes and people in the church, they're connected to, and I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it, I'm not sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. But they're connected to a suppressive organization. They just don't know it. But the Thetan always knows. Ultimately, you know everything. You've just forgotten it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're connected to a suppressive organization that's telling you, you got to do this and you've got to pay that and you've got to toe the line.
Got to do this over.
Right. You got to do this over. You're clear, but you're not clear. You're OT, but you're not OT. You got to do the survival rundown again. You got to start all over and you got to pay all this money again. And you got to walk that line. You are a potential trouble source. Your gains are not stable. And I used to wonder about this when I was in the church too, because I met so many more people that I thought, God, if that's OT, I don't want to be OT. I mean, there's just, and then
in defense,
yes,
I've met a lot of people in the independent field that I could say the same thing about.
Yes. And on the other hand, I have met a handful of people who were very able, stalwart, could hold their position in space with the church, and they were very, when I say they're able, I mean, it's not, money comes along with being able. You know, they were successful in their fields because they were able. Now, I can't speak for those people and say that, I mean, obviously ability comes with Scientology, or what's the point of doing it?
Yeah, responsibility.
Yeah. But they were responsible enough to tell the church, no, back off. And I'm looking at the pictures of it. I remember seeing it. This one particular person, smooth as silk. And I thought, man, if that's OT, I want what he's having.
Mm.
And there were several other individuals throughout the years that I've met when I was a kid, all the way up through being an adult. But they are the minority. And now looking back on it, I understand how suppressed people can be, because they're told, you need to do this, or they're just said, give me your money. We're going to do this with you. What is it you're going to do? Well, we can't tell you right now, but it's going to happen. Yeah. I mean, seriously, Arthur knows what I'm talking about. You haven't been in the church to experience that, but that is being suppressed. You just don't know it. And the worst part of it is that when you tell somebody, I lost all my friends when I told them what was really going on. And most of those people are out of the subject and the church entirely now, most of them, because it just took them longer to see the outpoints of the whole thing. And I feel bad that they're out of the subject entirely. It's not the subject, it's the corporation. So that's one way. And I think it's one of the biggies why people don't get what they should get out of it, is because they say again.
Sorry. I think also from what I've experienced as well, there's an element of the tech being taken. I don't know if literal is the right word, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's either literal or it's been misunderstood, where it's been so, like, I've met so many people, Scientologists, that have taken the text so literal that it's almost fake. You know, they're trying to keep up the tech in such a degree that they're not being themselves either. So it's kind of like an over extreme of what's being taught as well. Kind of like in a religious faith way as well, where it's too much. Like it actually, you become a robot as opposed to an enlightened being.
And LRH talks about robotism as part of being PTS as well.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of that. And that in itself, like you were saying earlier as well, you know, the Thetan knows. But when you're in that position, it can be really hard to confront.
Yeah.
You know, because you want the tech, but then the tech is being held ransom to you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my point, is that I told all these people and they were like, nope. You know, they got friends, they got family, wives, businesses, investments, all the money they paid the church. And there's no possible way that they could walk away from all of that stuff. And so they remain PTS to it. And I mean, just the fact that you will not consider the data and point things out. Things like on the cover of the book, it doesn't say by L. Ron Hubbard anymore. It just says L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah.
And you point those things out to them. Well, maybe there's a reason. And you can start to see the robot short circuit a little bit, but they're just in complete denial.
Even sticking to the topic of the podcast, that alone will remove so many potential OTs.
That's right.
They haven't even had the chance to reach that stage. Their determinism was in. They were open to the subject. All the pieces were put there for them. They were ready to rock and roll, but then something occurred, and then they just gave it up.
Yeah, and that's it's a double-edged sword that a person has to get past certain things in order to without sounding frou-frou, you have to be able to open up and go, okay, there is much I can learn about this. And if you can't do that, I mean, that's kind of that. And the reactive mind, to your point earlier, both yours, the reactive mind is a big part of that. And if a person doesn't really get that there is a reactive mind and that it's there constantly kicking in and being re-stimulated and turning on, because if it's not real to a person, and this also goes back to that thing where they really just don't get it and apply it to themselves, but they're like, telling people, you're being reactive about this. But when somebody says you're being reactive, all of a sudden, well, and you have to be able to take a step back. And that's really hard for people to do. And so they can apply it on them to others, but them to themselves is a really tough situation. PTS is part of it. They've got problems, confront. Again, to what you said earlier, Scientology girl, is responsibility. And that's a huge subject. Responsibility to self is very important in the subject, because if you think you know it all, and this is part of student hat, if you think you know it all, you're not going to learn anything.
I really like the word responsibility. I didn't always, but I really like it now. Once I had actually understood what it really was. So, I mean,
it's a dirty word in society.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. If somebody says you have such a good ability, right? Like, let's say obviously you can drum, right? And I say, that's a great ability. Is that my ability? No, because it's obviously yours, right? Therefore, with responsibility, it's always felt so other determined. Like everybody wants you, and maybe this is from childhood, like your parents tell you got to be responsible, but it's an ability to respond, and obviously it's responding correctly,
right?
But I think a lot of people, they're just stuck with their aberrations, and that makes them, they think they're responding correctly, but no. Being able to respond correctly is an ability.
Yeah, to have ability, you have to have responsibility. And like if it was an artistic thing, if a person has that ability, you have to have responsibility to have ability. That means you have to have self-discipline to practice, to be able to learn how to practice correctly, how to practice.
Yeah.
In some cases with something that's difficult.
And the thing is, it's obviously easy when you're passionate about something, but when you're not passionate about something, like for example, when you go on course and you have all these big words and LRH is telling you, just clear your words,
Right. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I think that, I mean, it's obvious, but again, we're presenting the obvious and having to overstate it because it is so overlooked that people do not give it enough attention to say, look, I get that this book is 500 pages long Dianetics. I get it. It's a lot to confront. But the thing is the most important things in life, nothing is easy. And if it's free, there's a reason, and nothing comes free in the physical universe. There's always a cost. That's just a fact. You got to be able to look at things and go, okay, I don't want to study, but there's a lot that I can get out of this. But getting a lot of people past that is one of the most difficult things. And that's where we lose it. And I've said in the podcast before, 95% of the people that start a free course never finish it with us.
I've actually thought of something. Okay, so we were on the basic level where it's, you know, words and courses and stuff. But let's think about auditing, right? Think about how many times people reach clear and that's it. Like, and it's like, okay, when you're going in session, it's kind of easy. You just, you sit there, you have a conversation. Well, you don't have a conversation, but the auditor asks you questions and then you go back and
direct their attention. So
it gets the person to obviously be, I guess, a victim. And then, but that's more Dianetics, right? Or I can't remember what you said.
It's both Scientology and Dianetics. Yeah. I mean, the whole bridge is what's been done to me, basically.
Right.
Because that works.
And then you've got to take some KRC for yourself and go on solo 1 and 2 and stuff. And how many people blow before that?
Yeah. I mean, it's surprising how many people we've have gone clear, and then they get on their solo course and they look at the fact that they have to confront a significant, I mean, solo course is long, but it's long for a reason, because you're now getting the auditor's viewpoint on this after just having the PC's viewpoint. And there's there's a fair amount of responsibility that a person needs to take on to understand that knowledge, to then apply it to yourself, because the best auditor you can have in the world is yourself. This is what LRH says about solo auditing. And that's a lot for people to take on. And they get 1 or 2 books in and they drop off because, well, there isn't any other reason. There isn't any other reason than misunderstood, or they have lack of mass. It isn't too steep of a gradient. That one doesn't apply unless they missed some earlier gradient, which is on them.
But even being willing to confront the material.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's first of all, that's the primary thing is, I mean, so many people have a hard time confronting the materials. I mean, just looking at what they have to do, the check sheet is almost unconfrontable for some people. Whatever the course is, I have to do this. I mean, we've all been there. I've got 4 years of high school. I've got 4 years of college, 12 years if I want to be some sort of a PhD. I mean, you know, I've got PCs that are doctors, and it's years, and it's not just the book learning. It's all of the personalities that you have to deal with in the middle of it that try and prevent you from achieving your goal because they're somewhat suppressive themselves. And people experience this stuff, and then they look at Scientology and they go, well, what if the same thing happens here?
Yeah.
And sometimes it does in some organizations, not ours, but I mean, that's the reactive mind kicking in. So when somebody says, well, I can't confront this check sheet, guess what? It's the reactive mind kicking in, and they're mocking this stuff up. They may be clear, but they can create a reactive mind. Even though you're clear, newsflash, it's out ethics for you to mock stuff up as a clear, because you can create a reactive mind again if you're not careful. LRH warns of this.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yes,
LRH warns of this, and he says that this is something you cannot do because you have the ability to or not to, and it is your responsibility to knock that shit off. But you know, OTs work better in numbers, clears work better in numbers, and if they don't have the training, they're going to fall into old habits again. And confronting a check sheet like for Solo 1 is a lot for a person, but some make it. Some don't, even with the best course supervisors. But another point I want to make on this real quick, and I'll turn it back over to you guys, is do not think for one moment that the obstacles that you face in doing any subject, I don't care whether it's Scientology, Dianetics, whatever it is, those obstacles are put there and created by you. You either agree with them or you disagree with them. And the people that agree with them, to this, the person that wanted us to do this podcast, that's a big part of it. Is you're either theta the solver or you're theta the problem. That's the opposite end of misunderstoods. You can either be the solver or you can be the problem. And to the degree that you're the solver is to the degree that you're going to get what it is you want to get out of it and expect it. If you can't have being an operating thetan and being responsible, well, you're just not going to be that. And that means taking responsibility for all 8 dynamics and whatever else it is that you want to do. Pat Krennic said this to me once. She's 95 and she's been in Scientology since 1952. And this isn't something LRH said, but it's something I've observed, that when a person goes OT, what it exemplifies is their own abilities and their own personality even more. Mm-hmm. You're improving that being, because every OT has their own niche type of a thing. And so that's something else that needs to be taken into consideration as well, is we all have our areas that we excel at, but Scientology can help you improve any area that you don't natively have. But that's what OT is. Some people will go on to be captains of industry. Other people will be creative artists, but it amplifies their base personality, who they are as a being. And to that degree, they need to understand the auditing side of it. 50% is training, 50% is processing. So that's something else that needs to be taken into consideration. Okay, I'm turning the mic over to you guys.
I've actually got 2 things.
Yeah.
I want to step back a little bit to this word responsibility. Many, many years ago, pre-Scientology, I actually started a YouTube channel because I had my healing business running, blah, blah, blah. I won't go into too many details. Mm-hmm. And I started exploring words. And the very first word I actually chose to explore was responsibility. And I don't know if you guys are familiar. There's an experiment called the Milgram experiment.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever come across that?
I've heard about it.
Yeah.
I don't think I have.
Yeah. So it's easy to find. Like if you do a search for it, you'll find the full experiment. It's a very simple experiment, and all it was originally, the experiment was based on after World War II, how somebody could kill / bulldoze so many dead bodies, and so it was all about how is it that men can be persuaded to kill so many people. Right. And it all came back to passing on the responsibility to someone else. So they set up a harmless modern day experiment where if people weren't responsible for the death of someone else, could they kill them? And that was pretty much the basis of the experiment. And so they set up this mock scenario where people had to ask a stranger that they couldn't see behind a wall if they had to ask them a series of questions, and if they answered the question wrong, they electrocuted them. So they had all these buttons and they'd electrocute them. And for every answer they got wrong, they had to increase the voltage up to 450 volts. And so on the other side of the wall, it was just a tape recording of somebody screaming, "No, stop, stop, stop. This is too much." But the people that are pressing the buttons they're being persuaded by the scientists conducting the experiment. They're like, well, what if I kill this man? Don't worry, you'll have no responsibility. You're just participating in an experiment. We'll pay you, and thanks for coming. And it turned out after this experiment, roughly off memory, I think it was roughly 55% of the public were willing to kill someone if they weren't responsible for it. And then Darren Brown, he reconducted that experiment probably in the last 15 to 20 years, and it worked out the same percentage. So it was something like 15 years apart of the same experiment, exactly the same. He replicated it in the modern time exactly the same, and it was still roughly the same amount of people were willing to kill someone if they weren't responsible for it. But then also, while I was exploring this word, is the way it's spelled. If you compare responsibility to other ability words that end with ability, responsibility isn't spelled that way. It's response ibility. It's not even spelt as ability. And I found that really interesting because, like, words are pretty powerful, yeah.
Mm.
And if people are reading it that way, then are they getting the full concept of the word? And I just found it odd that responsibility with, we sound it as ability, but it's not actually spelt that way. Whereas other ability words are spelt with ability
like
at the end of it.
Deniability.
Which is really interesting. And so while I was exploring that word, I found that to be like a trick to us, where the word doesn't quite sit comfortably, and it probably doesn't sit comfortably. I'm going to say it's simply because of the misspelling of it, because it doesn't actually say ability.
It isn't
you're
really
able to respond.
Yeah.
Right. It isn't really a contraction of response and ability.
Yeah.
It falls
That's
just,
right.
just short of that. So there's almost a little plausible deniability on it because, well, it's not really ability, is it?
It's like a trick. It's like it's
Close,
a trick
but no
because
cigar.
most people that hear this word have a negative context attached to it. And the way the word is used to manipulate people as well. You have a responsibility to drive at the speed limit, otherwise you will be punished. It's not saying, are you do you have the capability of responsibility to drive safely in this zone? They're very different. It's an interesting word, responsibility.
It's funny, but I'm just looking at the definition real quick, and it's basically saying that since it doesn't give the exact date, but since probably in the 1980s, the word responsibility is on a downtrend for use
on Google. As a graph.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
Is it any wonder?
But then also, and the second thing I wanted to go to, like with what you were saying earlier, the group dynamic, the way that's changed since the church at its peak, in the day of Ron Hubbard, how much of an impact does that have for people getting through the tech, reaching OT as well? Because studying on my own versus studying with 20 or 30 other people on the same thing, like at school, for example, I reckon if I was in a study group of some kind, studying the tech, I'd smash it because, I've got peers just as excited as I am to do the work, as opposed to being responsible for myself doing the work.
As a lone wolf. But, the back to the Milgram thing, that the first thing I thought of is where LRH says, and I'm just going to visit this for a couple of seconds. Ethics has to be in for the tech to be in, for the administration to be in. If your ethics aren't in, you're not going to get any gains.
But then also, to pair with that, LRH says ethics is reason. And you can't have reason if you have your reactive mind going.
and therein lies the rub on why that seniority of concepts has to be there. If you're okay with offing your fellow man because you're not going to go to jail, you kind of a lost cause already. And that goes back to what Artie was saying earlier. Why do some people get it and some people don't? Well, the index is, to the degree that you're aware on the awareness scale, it's to the degree you have a higher IQ. You have a higher ability to function. You You have a higher ability to observe. You have a higher ability to compare one thing to another, right from wrong, whatever it is.
I will say though, I haven't always agreed with that.
Mm-hmm.
I can see why it would be like that, but I'm not sure it's so absolute, because I have known some pretty intelligent people that were absolute dicks. Like, we're talking super unethical. I mean, we're talking about people who make business guys make a lot of money. They have to be smart in order to do that.
They use other people in order to, I mean, anybody that's filthy, stinking rich used other people.
Well, yeah, but I'm just talking about the individual intelligence. I don't think intelligent equates to being ethical.
Well, I am not saying that. I mean, some of the most suppressive individuals in history had high IQs. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that it is a 1-for-1 thing, but I am saying that those who do get the benefits from the subject and have an average or at least above average IQ, like LRH says, we help those who help themselves. If you are in really, really rough shape, we don't help the insane. That's not our job. There are insane people. We know what makes them insane. We can make them uninsane, but it takes a tremendous endeavor to make an unsane person sane with Dianetics and Scientology, because they're so far in the muck and they're out of present time. And where is your time best well spent? Your time best well spent is preventing people from making people insane. Well, what do you do? How do you do that? You take the people you can help and shoulder to shoulder effort to try and stop this insanity. That was LRH's original intention. Mm-hmm. That's how we were going to clear the planet, so to speak. But anyway, IQ is not a direct index as to whether somebody is ethical or unethical. It's just, you're absolutely right. I agree with that, and I think Arthur does too. But it's you've got to be able to see the trees for the forest, and that's ultimately the big issue. Can you see the trees for the forest?
And I think it also comes down to which dynamic we're talking about. Somebody could be super intelligent in one area, and in another they're just stupid.
That's because there's overts in that area that make them stupid. That's all there is to it.
I think Albert Einstein was excellent at mathematics and the physical universe and all that stuff.
But he was a player.
But he was an asshole on the second dynamic.
Right. He slept with Marilyn Monroe, for God's sakes. I mean, and that's supposedly. I mean, and that's nothing against Marilyn. I mean, she was a very intelligent person. She just happened to have an exterior that made her famous. Mm-hmm. And she was very, very suppressed because of it. And that is why her life ended as quickly as it did, is because of that. Mm-hmm. So, it's a tough universe. And the thing you have to do is you have to be sure to apply the technology to people as best you can, and apply it to yourself as best you can. If you do what he says, you'll get the results that he says. But it takes a degree of confront and responsibility go hand in hand.
Yeah. You can't, I mean, again, with responsibility and the reactive mind, you can't respond correctly. Well, I guess I already said that, but it's so broad, because, I mean, service facsimiles, for example, mm-hmm. What makes you right, or how's it worded again? It's like,
what do you use to make yourself right and others wrong?
Right.
What do you use to hinder the survival of others and aid your own?
Right.
As an example.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'll tell you, this planet is crazy with this stuff. Like, I literally had a conversation recently with somebody. She owes me a little bit of cash, and I mean, literally I've been waiting for over a year, and she's drip fed me things, and she's also drip fed me the truth about where it's going and all this stuff. And it's just like she's basically using her victimhood in order to, I guess, make herself right and me wrong, because that's really essentially what happened. But anyway, I'm not trying to get personal, but it's amazing how different life could be if people just took responsibility. Because I mean, like I've been in that situation where I've had to make excuses and stuff, and I've just felt awful about myself. And when you feel awful about yourself, knowing, because like you said,
well,
the Satan always knows whether or not you're making excuses, you know, and your self-worth is compromised. You don't have respect for yourself because your integrity is not intact. And then, you know, your whole life goes to shit. And then guess what? You don't even see that you are the problem because you're trying to maintain that rightness. And so blame everything else but you for it. And so I think same thing can be said for, you know, whether Scientology could work for you or not. It's like if you're going to blame your auditor or the scheduling app or the course you're on for maybe having a typo or, you know, any of these things, like, dude, get over it, get on course, stick with the plan. The plan is you need to have your life together and you want spiritual freedom and stuff. Well, do the thing. It's as simple as that.
Arthur, he's nodding profusely.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. And it goes back, like everything you just shared, all goes back to reactive mind, doesn't it? And it all goes back to those basics. And you know, the only thing I think that was missing that I could pick up was a willingness to want to.
Yeah.
Because that will bring in your responsibility as well. Because if you have a willingness to want to do something, well, then naturally you need to become responsible for the things that are preventing you. And I think it's just that want to do it.
But I think also sometimes we can want something and then we realize the work involved. And, you know, it's that underestimation of effort. And that underestimation of effort oftentimes, well, I'm going to say almost exclusively is the reactive mind. Because here's the thing, if you're infinitely capable, right, as a being, no obstacle should be too great for you. So if you're underestimating the effort and then buying into that, yeah, you'll obviously not have the greatest success at what you want.
Yeah, I've written an article that's on our website about this, but you know, the too long didn't read is you got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah,
you got to be honest with yourself. That's the biggest hurdle of all, and the reactive mind changes the color of your lenses. It makes the water seem deeper than it really is. I mean, you know, you could go on and on and on with the analogies, but that's what it comes down to is if you can't be honest with yourself, again, like Hubbard says, ethics has to be in for the tech to go in. If you're not honest with yourself and you're saying to yourself, well, I've done everything I can, and you really haven't, then you're not being honest with yourself. But complexity and confronting that datum, if there's something that's complex to you, just look at it and go, okay, what about this is complex? Oh, it's this. Okay, that's what I'm not confronting. Confront that thing in that complexity, which isn't always easy, but it can always be done. Confront it, and the whole complexity just melts away, and you can be a cause over it. That's being honest with yourself.
Yeah, and for anybody listening who has this like 100 or 1,000-pound elephant or whatever, how much do elephants weigh?
Over a ton.
Okay, well,
it's around a ton, isn't it? Yeah,
it's a lot.
Yeah, whoever has this giant elephant, you know, that they're dragging along. I just want to say that there's a lot of things that you can actually do to make that elephant not seem so big. And it begins and ends with just a little confront. If you can just see what you can confront. We're not saying, you know, stand in front of it with like a pitchfork or something. No. It's simply a case of just get in communication with the thing. Like maybe, you know, stand outside and look at the elephant from a window, or, and I'm using a whole bunch of euphemisms, but even LRH said, you know, if you're struggling to confront studying, that was Snowy sitting on the keyboard. I'm not sure if everybody heard that. Snowy's our white cat. But anyway, if I mean, LRH said, when studying, just confront the materials. Just, look at the
just look at the
you don't
materials.
have to read the whole thing.
Just confront it.
And the stuff surrounding it, notepads, pens, papers, all of those things. So that's one way. Another thing is that there's tons of resources for people who might not be able to do it alone. I mean, with us, for example, we're always available, if somebody,
except when we're sleeping.
Yeah, except when we're sleeping. But I mean, we can get back to messages and stuff. So, just if there is something that you think that you're waning responsibility on, it's not as big as you are making it. Trust me, you are bigger than whatever stands in your way of whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Arthur?
I was going to raise a question, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the way time has changed now and the way society's changed, is it harder to study this subject? Was it easier to study the subject 50 years ago versus now? I mean, on one hand, we've got the technology to make it easier, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
With the internet and word clearing, and the internet can make it so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at multiple dictionaries online without having to pick up an actual dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like that OCA question. Mm-hmm. Do people have more opportunity now than they did, back then?
That's right.
A generation ago?
Yeah. So like, is that a plausible element, or is that just a justification I just made up to?
Well, I mean, it's kind of both, like, and I always think of this, the movie Sound City with Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters. He says, you got all this technology to make better music and everything. And is music better? No, it's worse. But that's a relative thing too, dependent upon your viewpoint.
Yeah.
But it's
like, I suppose now we've got so many more distractions.
That was exactly where I was headed to. Is you have
the compensation.
Yeah.
And all this easy access and ability makes us kind of lazy too.
Yeah. Arthur.
But even to earn money as well requires a lot more effort now as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Things are so expensive in that sense, and work takes up a lot of time for a lot of people. Some people have to work multiple jobs, and then to realistically approach, studying, even like you said earlier, Dianetics, such a large book, that could be enough for people to just bail without even opening the book.
Yeah. It's the hardest thing, and we're looking at almost 35 years ago, when I was, of course, supervisor and an auditor in a Scientology organization. When I was course supervising, held from above as the organization executive secretary and the technical secretary and the lead course supervisor, all these hats, I spent more time calling people trying to get them on course than I did supervising. Because they had so many other fish to fry, justifiers for this, and can do this, and has that changed? Not one bit. Not one bit.
Okay, sure.
Doesn't the technology? I don't know that it's helped. I don't know that it's hindered. I think my personal opinion is that any technology that we have that we didn't have in 1990 or 89 has been canceled out by all of the downsides, the distractions that it creates, and justifications, and I mean, I still can't believe, and I haven't been in a high school in a long time or workplace, but we went out the other night, and here were all the employees staring at their phone. They're on the clock and they're staring at their phone. In what world is that okay, that somebody gets paid to stare at their phone? Your phone goes in this. I'm sorry, people are gonna think I'm the biggest jerk in the world, but I'm gonna say it. Your phone goes in a safe and it's locked. You get your phone back when you're off, or you're on break.
Mm.
Now that sounds like a tyrant, something like that. But the thing is back in the 80s, you know, if somebody came in and said, you know, I need to talk to you 8 times while I was on a shift at Applebee's waiting tables, what would they say to me? You're fired. Yeah. And that's a reasonability where you have this interjection of this useless information that is popping up on your phone. It pops up on my watch. You know, Uber's saying this, Uber Eats is saying that. I'm getting this message and that message that I didn't ask for because I have an app on my phone and my watch is getting the message. So your attention is subdivided, and it's become okay to be distracted all of the time instead of get the job done. Now, in a course room, your phone stays at the front desk while you're on course. Just leave it there. You can shut it off. You can leave it on.
Yep, that's right.
I don't care. When you're on course, you're on course because you're here to get something done to better your life, not be distracted by present time problems or somebody to send you a heart emoji or whatever. You got to get the job done. I think that it's done more harm than it has good. I'm not anti-technology, but give me a break. What do you guys think? Have things gotten better? Has it made it easier to be on course? Has it made it easier to improve your life? Whether you're using Scientology or you're doing Jenny Craig.
Yeah. Well, you know, the whole distraction thing. It's funny that we're bringing it up now because I was actually watching a TED talk about mindfulness and being in the present moment.
Yeah.
And I think that he went as far as to say that they did a study, and apparently that study led him to, it basically said that 75% of the time we are basically on autopilot. We are not immersed in the present moment. I mean, that is a huge statistic. Mm-hmm. And it's not even just a case of, you know, when you're on your phone, you just because you're constantly distracted by something, you're training your mind to need to be distracted constantly.
Okay. Yeah, you get reasonable about it.
But it's not really a conscious thing even.
No.
In fact, it's completely unconscious, because I think if the statistics are that we're happier when we're in the present moment, right? Mm-hmm. We'd all want that. Mm-hmm. So we actually have to, you know, train ourselves to actually come back, and it goes along with confront as well. Mm-hmm. If you look at the TRs, that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, nobody wants, unless you're a monk, nobody wants to just sit there and you know, whether you have your eyes closed or your eyes open, it is boring. Yeah. It's boring because of how we have conditioned ourselves.
Right. That's right. And now I'm going to contradict myself completely. Yesterday, I played Beat Saber to do my cardio on our Sony VR system. And it was the second time I did it. And I did it for, I don't know, 40 minutes. And I had forgotten how much being in present time down to the split second to be able to play that game with these controllers in VR mm-hmm. to a tempo of 135 beats per minute. How great it felt to be in present time and just be there and be out in front of it and look at what's coming down that tunnel towards you and be ready for the up or the down or the red or the blue, or it's going to switch it on you and keep, and you know, I'm a drummer, but I mean, like, to your point, you tend to get so spread thin by all of these things getting your attention, and oh, there's this and oh, there's that and all this stuff. But if you really focus and you're really in present time, there is nothing else like it at all. You are in the moment, and it is so emancipating. It's incredible. And I was like, yeah, this is really cool. And I'm, you know, the game is cool, don't get me wrong, but just being in present time and walking out of there and going, yeah, I got over 500 calories burned. I'm sweating like crazy, and I am in present time. I can see the light bulbs flickering. I'm so in present time. That's really something to be able to do that. And the more you get yourself into that, whether you're doing a game or not, but you start to get an idea of what this is like. And what I'm leading to is, this is what Scientology does to you. You've forgotten who and what you are and what you're capable of, because of all of these distractions that you've gone into agreement with, or you've made yourself, you've mocked up, you've made postulates, and you don't remember how thin you were, as an example, when you were a teenager, and how easy things were and all the energy you had. You've gone into agreement when you get in your 40s and 50s, well, I got to take it slow, or I got to be careful, I might get hurt, and all this jazz. But that's not necessarily true. It's what you go into agreement with, and what you put there or what you don't put there. And that's what Scientology and Dianetics enables you to do, is recover yourself, whether it's your beingness, your body, whatever.
Yeah, so it would be then accurate to say, in order to discover that aspect of who you really are, you've got to kind of be willing to let go of who you're being currently.
Yeah, and that's not it's a lot easier said than done in some situations. And that's why I thought it would be good to do a podcast on this, is because it's very easy to get distracted and not know what the truth is. But at the end of the day, you are, this is gonna sound as corny as can be, you are the truth. Or you're not. That's it.
Right. I want to go back a little further.
Yeah.
So back to today's time, because like all these, and like you've set out a whole heap of great examples about being in present time, and then also around, the way the attitude of society is changing as well, because all that stuff will become the new moral and the new ethic. So could those things be dangerous towards the subject of Scientology, as far as its survival going as well? You know what I mean? Because like those young people that are doing that now, when they become employers, what are they going to allow their staff to do? So back in my generation, which is probably, 10 years after yours, the attitude was very different around doing things, being responsible, achieving. It was a bit tougher. Well, actually, it was a lot tougher. Whereas now that's missing. Like that aspect is gone. It's like, well, why would I want to do that if I don't have to? It kind of goes back to the Milgram experiment. I reckon if that Milgram experiment was done now, the statistics would go from probably 55% to maybe 75%. The lack of responsibility current society has. And then how do you break through that when it's all around you? And like, as silly as it sounds, I still relate this to approaching towards studying something.
Yeah, absolutely.
To becoming an OT. Like, how does one imagine being an OT now? Is it seeing all this stuff going on around you? Like, would you want to stay OT? You know what I mean?
Well,
I just wanted to say one thing, which is that it almost looks like, and you guys can have a totally different viewpoint, but for me, it looks like there was a point where there was, like when you look generationally, there was self-determinism, which I think was you guys, Gen X.
Well, I appreciate that. I didn't know that was the case.
Then it went to other determinism, the 90s millennials. And now it's gone back to self-determinism, and nobody knows what the fuck to do. Because, we're talking about, people who were responsible in your generation, then people who had to be, other people and all of that. And now that everybody's just dropped the ball. So,
who's gonna fix this? I'm waiting for somebody to fix this.
Yeah. And I'm all for soft parenting, but I think that there are there's neglect involved in today's society, in children and teens, where it's like, obviously there's this whole, constant distractibility and all that stuff, devices and everything. And they're just kind of left to be like, okay, well, I guess we've got to figure this out. But I think it's going to take a long time. Whereas I think with 90s kids was like enforced. You had to do it.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So
you had to talk to people. You had to ring them. You had to write them. You had to physically be in their presence to communicate. There's all those human elements attached there. And then when it comes to bettering yourself, why would you need to now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even little elements, when you describe them to people, it used to be the phone was connected to the wall. And when somebody called,
that's right.
Heaven forbid, you didn't know who was calling. And then there was star 69 and you could call them back by dialing star 69 and you could call the person back, but you still didn't know who it was that called you. You were calling back somebody blindly. And if you told people that now, the current generation of teens, even into 20s, people, well, I was just thinking the other day, there's a whole generation of people that have been born that didn't know existence without a smartphone. I would just think about that for a moment. But I mean,
what's worse is that even if you had to tell them, they wouldn't have the interest that you might have had when you were a kid. I mean, even today, you're very interested in the world around you, in people, and all of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of this different disassociation going on.
Yeah,
with people,
teens and kids today would just be like, okay, cool story, bro. I got to go play Roblox or some shit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to be nostalgic, but I mean, I remember being ridiculously bored as a kid because there were 3 TV channels, VHF and UHF. We had 2. So we had 5 TV channels. There was no cable. There was no smartphones. The phone was connected to the wall. On Sundays, everything was closed because it was a religious day back in the 70s. And you went outside and played with sticks or rode your bike or went into the woods with your friends and did something, set up a fort. I mean, you didn't have a lot of options. So your creativity was the thing that entertained you. And as time goes on, I mean, I think it's gotten to a point to where everybody's senses have been so dulled because there isn't anything that surprises them anymore due to technology. Yeah.
I mean, if you think about, games, right? Games are quite a bit other determined, even though it doesn't seem apparent. And I have a good point for this. So like, if you have to look at the differences, right? Like you said, when you're a kid, it's down to creativity. With gaming, there are fixed rules, and you've got to stay within the confines of those rules. Therefore, creativity is very limited. Of course, if you're playing an open world game, okay, sure, you can, pick the death bells or whatever off the ground, like in Skyrim, and make a potion or whatever. But there's still, rules and stuff, and you don't create your own reality. And so, how creative can you be as an adult when you have that? How interested are you going to be in a self-determined world?
Yeah, well, it comes down to that. I mean, you just blithely say, entertain me.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, you could say that all you wanted, and your parents would say, go outside and play.
Yeah.
And come back in an hour and let me know where you are and what you've been doing, type of a thing. And if I did something wrong or I talked back, I was going to get smacked or I was going to get my butt beat.
Yeah.
And I respected my elders and, all that stuff. And that's, it does affect people on their ability to want to better themselves because they're so used to pressing a button and just being given this information. Oh, I'll just watch a video instead of researching, digging into things. I mean, libraries, I'm sure libraries are an all-time low unless people are going, they're the same because people are going in to use the internet at the library, which just was smart on their part. But, I mean, that's something that we have to figure out. I mean, I've given it thought. I've thought, well, what if we set up a VR? And this was John Nunez suggested this to me. Even what if we set up a VR organization? I mean, because VR headsets aren't cheap; they're getting cheaper. Where the person could come in and they could be on course, and they, would it help for these generations that are so used to being in this other, more technological world? I don't know if it would work or not, but it would take a lot of work to do it. But it's getting easier. Mm. But the thing is at the end of the day, what you put in is what you get out. And that's something my generation learned is nothing comes easy, and you have to work for it. And if it's easy, it's probably not worth it. Mm-hmm. You have to work for these things. And Scientology and Dianetics came from a guy that came from a generation that would have been my grandfather's generation. And they viewed things significantly different. Their viewpoints were different. But our society exists because of those viewpoints to a greater degree.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that there are basics that in order to keep the society going, there are principles that we have to look at. Responsibility, confront. It's difficult to sell this stuff to 20-something. I mean, if you look at the people that watch our videos on YouTube, there are no 20-somethings, no teen-somethings that watch our videos. They're all in the range of about 40 to 60.
Yeah.
That's what YouTube says.
Why would you want to confront yourself? Because that's ultimately what you're doing when you're confronting your case. If you could just, zone out and pretend that your problems don't exist. Is this need for escapism is what's crippling this generation?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not looking good if things don't turn around. Yeah. And the only way to do that is you have to take personal responsibility, that dirty word, self-discipline, confront, and do something about it before and I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I'm just saying that if you're getting everything served to you on a platter, there's going to be something on that platter you don't want. And that's the way the society is gearing itself up is that 2030 rolls around, you'll own nothing and be happy. We need to watch out for this. Things are getting dicey.
Well, unfortunately, the trick really is that it's got to do with winning. So when you actually take responsibility and you are self-determined and you're practicing all these things and stuff, being an adult, right? It is fun. It is fun watching your life unfold because of they're the fruits of your efforts.
Right. Things improved. Hey, I did that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's this immediate gratification thing, and that's where gaming comes in because it's instant dopamine. You win, you win, you win, you win.
Yeah.
Whereas, obviously living a life there, as LRH says, time is aberrative. It's one of the most, if not, I think he said the most aberrative qualities that we have. I think it's in the Scientology axioms.
Yeah, it's in the Scientology axioms. That's the thing. And that's a lot to confront because time is motion. And if you have lots of pretty things being put in front of you that move around and have bright colors and explosions and all of that stuff, you might as well just give it up because that's not what it's all about. It's about creativity and flourishing and prospering something you caused.
And my nephew, just real quick, he's obviously, he was a full-time gamer. He's 18 and he loved gaming. And then he went over to Scientology. We were like, look, if you're going to do this, do it right. There's basically the training and everything that he was getting and stuff. And he himself was like, you know what? I don't know what's going on with me, but I do not find enjoyment in gaming anymore as much as I used to. Mm-hmm. And that was like a wow moment, he
sent that to me yesterday.
Yeah.
Too.
He did?
On his own. He said that, he's somebody else I told him, I said, my great uncle said, one of these days, John, you're not going to want to play with these Star Wars figures anymore. You're not going to be interested in this. And I was just like, that'll never happen, Dave.
Yeah.
Star Wars forever. Yeah. And things change and you start to look at things and go, okay, this isn't as important. Oh, wait, I've got to pay the bills. And you get caught in the hamster wheel of survival and all of that. And then I got trained as an auditor and I was like, okay, I'm going to play my own game. I'm going to create my own life, that type of a thing. And I was lucky. I got just like Matt, you're our nephew. He's looking at it going, yeah, there's a lot more to this than I thought, because he's no longer distracted. It's like that we talked about in a couple podcasts ago. Your disbelief is no longer suspended with video games, and I think it's an illusion.
Yeah, and I think that the thing is that nothing can compare to the feeling of winning in real life,
because you caused it to happen.
Yeah. A game has these, as I was saying earlier on, it has these set rules and stuff where, you've got to stay within the confines. Whereas when he's creating this, he's doing it all on his own, and nothing can compare to that. But you've got to get the person enough out of that, and they've got to see some wins and stuff for it to actually happen. And this is something that we actually, I don't think, haven't really discussed. Scientology is not going to work for you if you're, it will, but very slowly if you're addicted to things.
Yeah, because that goes back to
problems.
Your ethics are out on your first dynamic.
Yeah. And
I think the purification rundown, you get in the box and everything, and you start sweating this stuff out. If you're addicted to drugs, stimulants, and things like that, you realize, what the hell was I thinking at that time? Wouldn't you say, Arthur?
It's funny because I actually want to get back in the sauna. I think the pure itself can become an addiction.
Right, because it's a key
like
out.
The last few days, I'm like, you know what? I actually wouldn't mind getting back into it and just continuing it.
Yeah, I've felt that way myself.
Yeah, not because I have to, but because I actually want to.
Right. That's a lot to confront.
It's really interesting.
Do you think is it the sensation of it? Do you think it's the sensation?
Is it the physical side, or is it the spiritual side?
That it's benefiting you health thing.
Okay, so we've all had auditing, yeah? In this case, it's exactly like auditing, but on a very real level. Not that I'm saying auditing isn't real.
It's a subjective.
The vitamins in the sauna is your auditor, and you're kind of in a position where things present them. You don't have to look for the things. You don't have to go over the scenarios before they present themselves. The scenarios present themselves.
So it's basically therapy. Therapeutic.
Very much so. Very confronting. Don't get me wrong. Not all of it was bad or confronting, but some of it was exceptionally confronting, where, 3 days in a row, I had a realization occur on the first day, and it took me three days to conclude it. And those 3 days were pretty terrible 3 days, very upsetting. Like, every day I was on the verge of just crying. The overwhelm of what presented to me in that particular situation took a lot to work through, and the sauna helped. Like on one hand, the sauna presents you with the problem, but then it also helps you take the problem away. Like it's really weird. It's a full Stockholm syndrome.
Even meditation is awful when you first start. You're like, I just want my mind to shut the fuck up, but it doesn't. So
it's the same way on TR0, where you're just like, God, I just want to be here and be comfortable. But I start thinking about that song that's been an earworm, or why are the birds chirping so much in the background? Now, what are the dogs barking out?
Yeah.
That's the thing, is the way out is the way through. And that's the neat thing. That's the neat thing about this is like, but
ethics basically eventually starts becoming fun.
Exactly. And that's that when you cross that hurdle.
Yeah. Because I had to do low carb, and I'm still trying. But at one point when we were living at the by the beach front, when we were living there, I was making salads every day for breakfast. And in the beginning, I was like, salad for breakfast? Who the fuck does that? But then, I started getting into it. And then after a while, I think it was like the 2-week mark or something, I was like, you know what? I do not want to have anything else for breakfast than this, because it sets you up so good for the day, having all that nutrition immediately, like the first thing. I mean, sure, you could have fruit instead, but the point is that anything difficult, anything that's good for you is going to be difficult in the beginning.
Right. The time you put in and the crate you put on it is to the degree that you're going to get something out of it. When you're handed a digital device or some sort of push button thing, there's not a whole lot coming from it. I mean, even if you take an online course and you have to watch 100 hours of videos, you still had to watch 100 hours of videos, and whether you duplicated it, understood it, and can apply it, you put that time in. That's different. And it's the same way with Dianetics and Scientology, taking courses, doing auditing. I have people that go in session 5 days a week. I also have people that go in session 1 day a week, and they complain that, they'd like to get in more. And my answer to them is get in session more often. Because then you will find more time to do things, and it just becomes more and more. You are a cause over this, and but you got to get there. You've got to put the time in. You've got to arrange your universe to be able to get these things, get from them what you want. And
you'd be absolutely surprised when you kick back up against the reactive mind with regards to, like you were saying, time as one example. Like you will definitely see, like, I had all this time that I was just, because we don't know how much time we actually spend scrolling through our phones and stuff. I mean, you can have screen time on and you can see over there, and you'd be shocked. What? Yeah, exactly.
It's funny because when I committed to the Purif, I had to dedicate quite a number of hours.
Yeah, you did.
Organize my life around it as well, right? And what's really stupid is I managed to do it. Yeah. Like I managed to do it. Right. But to be fair, like I didn't commit the full 5 hours every day, but I did a minimum of. So I did a minimum. I mean, when I first started, the sauna was intense. I couldn't get past an hour.
Yeah.
But then after a few days, I was able to do.
Yeah. You got up to 4 hours pretty quick. Yeah.
I did get up to 4 hours as well. But that's not including exercise. That's not making sure you stop to have food. That's not including
getting your vitamins ready.
That's not including washing yourself afterwards, washing all the sweat and the detox after you, right? It actually adds a lot of time onto, the estimated time for it. Not just that, but you have to, you just have to make it happen.
Do you have more time now?
No, because what's happened for me is because I put so many things off in that month. Now I'm catching up.
Well, I can understand.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And mainly just work and social, because I lost a lot of my social Well, I didn't lose them, but I wasn't able to be social around that period because I made a commitment to this. You know what I mean? Whereas now that commitment's done, I've sort of gone back, but with a little bit of guilt too, because I know I can do it, which is really bizarre.
Going back to or rather, no, it's kind of within the confines of this conversation. Alaroach, in one of his, I think it was a policy, he had mentioned that people have this tendency to, well, let me rather say some people have this tendency to organize and not actually get any work done. And that's, I think, where the whole CSW thing came from, so that there's, instead of having all these things like develop traffic, etc., you just stay, this is what you got to do. And I think this is probably a point of reactivity as well, where you're so compulsively because reactivity isn't just about, oh, I'm scared, oh, I'm angry and stuff, right? It can take on so many different manifestations. And within this situation, I mean, it's happened to me before, where I've been so busy organizing and, you know, getting all like swept away with notepads and boards, pin boards, and all this stuff. And you make lists and you're doing your admin scale. And all that
organization
stuff.
became to develop traffic.
Exactly. and I think that can happen because of a lack of confront to what you should be doing. So, and I even, if you look in terms of psychology or neuroscience, they say that when you do that, when you write down lists and all this stuff, it gives you a hit of dopamine.
Mm-hmm. That's what I've done.
Because it's like, oh, I won by doing this at least.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's okay within reason. I mean, you've got, like LRH says, there's a policy on it: cope and organize.
Yeah.
You don't just keep coping or organize. Yeah. It's cope and organize, and you put order in. That's what a Thetan does in the Scientology axioms, is you're putting order into chaos in the physical universe. Entropy is a real thing in this universe. Things are constantly changing, and you're putting that order in, and you're putting that order in.
And what I also wanted to add just real quick with that is that I think sometimes with regards to the what this podcast is all about, when won't it work for people, right? Mm-hmm. It can present itself when you're trying to organize everything. It can present itself, well, if I just have this, if I just do this, if I just first, then I can focus on auditing.
Yeah, that's reactivity.
Just confront your case.
Be there and confront your case. And it is
the reactive mind is always going to put stops in your way and make you think that you don't have time. It's right. Part of its purpose.
Right. I mean, you felt that way on the pier. If you're like, I don't know if I've got the time, didn't you, Artie?
Very much so. But the moment you pointed it out to me, like it just clicked. It's like, oh my God, it's so obvious. But I couldn't see how obvious it was until you made me aware of it. And that's how sneaky the reactive mind is.
Yeah.
You know, it's so believable. It's incredible. It's an incredible manipulating, persuading, perfectly sentenced, perfectly justified.
Mm-hmm.
You can't deny it when it presents itself. But the moment you spot it, you think, oh my God, how the bloody hell have I lived with that all my life?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've had to tell people when they finish, they've gone clear and they're on their solo course and everything. I tell them, look, anything and everything you can possibly think of as a stop, you're going to create. Your case is going to create in getting you onto the OT levels. And nobody really, and this, it's an interesting point. Nobody really, I'm going to say, takes that literally. And then they come back to me, and you've seen this. We've had several people say this.
So it's like this popped up in my life, but no, it wasn't because of the level I'm on.
And that is so not the case. It is so not the case. And I've had people literally fall out of the sky and nearly die.
I remember that.
I'm serious. To fall out of the sky and nearly die, who were on their solo course, and I'm not naming any names or anything like that, and they're still not back on because it's just wait, but it's gonna be next month. It's gonna be next month. It's gonna be next month. That is the OT case, mocking up, putting a stop there. Okay. And at the end of the day, you're mocking it up because you're agreeing with those stops, if nothing else. It can be worse than that. But the thing is once you go clear, that's great. A being who no longer has their own reactive mind. But wait, Pandora's box has now been opened, and you have to confront other reactive minds that have to be handled in your universe.
Yeah.
They're not yours. We won't get into that. But the fact of the matter is you can either agree with it or you can disagree with it.
And I think once you experience the reality of that once, it snowballs from there.
Yes.
You'll resist, but then your moment you make the connection and you can see it, you're like, oh wow. Then you want it more.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a new addiction,
has
and
to
a
be
new
real
desire and a new want. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
because we can explain the crap out of it, but there's a reality that can't be explained. There's a reality that words cannot create such a reality. It needs to be felt, touched, experienced.
Yeah.
Then then the words make sense.
I mean,
then those words become real. Up until that point, it's well, yeah, well, maybe it wasn't that. It probably was this.
Yeah.
Like for me, in the last month I've had has been like a year. The things that have just arisen that I know are to me changing my dynamic, therefore realities that were always in front of me, I could never see, but now I could see them. Now I have to do something about it. And it's because of this dynamic. I could blame all these experiences as coincidences, but I'm at a point where I know it's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
It's part of my world. You know what I mean? They're things I've created. They're things I've participated in. They're things that I've somehow been connected to that I now need to change big time.
Right. So your awareness level has come up to a point where you're like, there is definitely something to this.
Yeah.
And I am at the center of it.
Very much.
And even if you have to look at it in a more, not that I'm saying it's not practical, but in a more sort of physical, university, okay, I'm just going to say practical sense. There have been times, well, in the past, I think, when I'd get turbulated, angry, upset, or whatever, it would last a very long time. I may have mentioned this in another podcast. And then, once you know the data and you know what service facsimiles and overts and all this stuff, you can just, mechanics, you self-correct. And I've been able to do that where and I never could do it. No matter if I was meditating daily, no matter what I did, it just wouldn't cease to exist. I'd still have that residual feeling like,
it's just omnipresent. And there's an 800-pound gorilla standing over you in the shadows in front of you.
Yeah, maybe I'm calm, but my body isn't, kind of a thing, But then since Scientology and doing the levels and stuff, I've been able to look at things. If I'm having a bad day or something, I will have a realization about it. Like, is this? Am I creating this feeling, or what have I not taken accountability for, or is there some overt that's causing me to be so hostile and critical? And all of a sudden, just like that, like freaking magic, it's just gone, gone. And
as isness occurs,
okay, fine, fair enough. Okay, great. Lisa's in a good mood. What now? But that kind of thing affects every area of your life.
Sure.
If you are going to constantly be, just triggered by everything and not have the ability to self-correct, well, guess what? That's basically PTSD, because you're going to constantly be putting that stuff on other people, and you're not going to be making the right choices and being responsible, because let's face it, how many good decisions have come from reactivity? I mean, it might be good, when you're in the wild and you're trying to survive and there's this fear because the lion's chasing you, but it's not good in modern day society.
Pretty limited in scope.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've pretty much outgrown the reactive mind without outgrowing the reactive mind.
Right. And like Hubbard says,
I totally relate to everything you just said. So so much processing, if I had a situation, I could be stuck in that for weeks. Weeks. Whereas now it's, depending on what it is, it's minor. Very minor. It's from weeks to maybe an hour. Some things require more than an hour, but as far as the emotional value attached to it goes, going into a dark space or a heavy space, one situation could make me miserable for a long time. Whereas now it's exactly as you said.
Yeah.
You know, all these little tools come in and all these things come in and you start thinking about them. Okay, you know, what's going on here?
You're
you know,
applying
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And I
you're
think,
applying it naturally, so
Yeah.
naturally. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I've got this situation going on. I'll deal with it when I can deal with it. Right now, I've got the rest of my life to continue.
yeah.
And it just turns off. Like, it's incredible.
And I think that's the difference between Scientologists, or rather practicing people, you know, Scientology, who are actually using the tech, versus people who are either not and they know Scientology or don't know Scientology at all, is because when we feel that way, it is the reactive mind's duty to obviously keep us safe, therefore keep us right. So we always are looking externally for problems. And those obviously we know are justifications and all of that. But then when you're a Scientologist, obviously, you know, and this sort of goes in line with, if for anything to persist, there needs to be a lie. If your mood is persisting, there's a lie, right?
You know, something unexpected that's causing that to persist.
Yes, because it's always external. You're always looking externally. But once you evaluate and introspect and look internally, what could I have been responsibility?
That's right.
Yeah, what could I have been responsible for? What was my role in this? Why am I being critical? Yeah, and most people don't want to touch that because it makes them wrong.
Yeah.
But I would much rather be wrong to be right. And what I mean by that is I'd much rather say, hey, you know, you're being critical because guess what? You kind of left the thing on the counter because, but like John wanted you to put it in the fridge, you know, that kind of thing, something silly.
What's my role in this?
Yeah,
in other words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as soon as you do that, it's like gone. It's just gone. You're like, oh, okay, well, there, I'll mock that up.
States of being, as isness, alter isness,
it also
not
makes you
isness.
mindful. Yeah. But it also makes you more mindful on how you approach things as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing, like it's a double-edged, well, it's not a double-edged sword, but it's twofold, because on one hand, you know, you can go internal, but then you can also put that external as well when you're dealing with other people too, which is really cool. You know, you're more careful how you present.
Yes.
You know, a boundary, for example, you're more careful and considerate on how you ask something from someone. You know, because you know how it can affect you in such a detrimental way from your previous experiences, but now you're aware how those things were presented to you to upset
it makes you more compassionate.
Well, yeah, and
I think more mindful. I think mindful, maybe not necessarily compassionate, but I
compassion
think more
comes
mindful
later.
and more, and maybe more intentional on your approach. You know what I mean? More considerate, more intentional, because sometimes you can't be compassionate to get a good result. You know what I mean?
Well, that's true. And
sometimes you just have to say it, but then saying something confronting with consideration, you know, doesn't mean aggressive. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's all a gradient process. And at some point you have a completely different viewpoint than from when you started. And you're going to have a lot of those completely different viewpoints, and they all add up to a really large, completely different viewpoint where you're like, geez, I got to do something about this for other people because, well, it's the right thing to do, type of a thing. I mean, that's one viewpoint. I'm not saying that's the end all where everybody ends up, but you know, happiness is to the degree that you know you're taking responsibility for your dynamics. That's what ethics is your reasoning. This is the right thing, the best thing to do, not just for yourself, but for animals and plants and trees and physical universe objects and spiritually and other beings and all this stuff. But getting there, it takes time and it takes confront. And if you do it, the rewards, I mean, you cannot describe to anyone the things that they will experience in these subjects until they experience it for themselves. Both of you guys have said that today.
Yeah. I mean,
100%.
When everything, like sometimes you'll get in a mood and everything kind of seems gray, even though the sun is shining outside. There's just like this sort of cloud, this veil kind of thing. And then, you know, you'll have a realization like I'm creating this situation, and then boom, the colors return, and suddenly you can smell, things, and you can see things that you didn't realize, and all this stuff. I mean, it's absolutely incredible stuff. Incredible.
Yeah, you make your own emotion, and the universe around you it is there and responds to what you put in it, or you don't put in it ultimately. So, well, we've gone pretty long on this one. I hope everybody's enjoyed listening to this, and we got into a bunch of different directions that I didn't even consider.
Yeah, we never do consider where it can go, but it's fun that way.
Yeah. So, any closing statements from you guys before we say goodbye?
Just be responsible, and know that responsibility is yours and yours alone, and it's a good thing, not a bad thing.
Right. Arthur?
Justifications are exceptionally powerful. So in conclusion, if you want to, you will. And if you don't, you won't.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, for Scientology Girl and Arthur Mudakis, myself, Jonathan Burke, we hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we will see you tomorrow for a yet to be determined second podcast this week in the month of September 2024. Namaste, and we love you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.